Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Javier here with the real Javier Novoa. Just sitting here while waiting on something, doing some contemplation here. A lot of interesting news, guys, on the economic front. A lot of interesting stuff unfolding on the international relations front. Just the changing aspects of a world in flux, ladies and gentlemen. The great Greg Braden talking about again just how the magnetic field of the earth has been decreasing year after year, and that is now accelerating. Also, there are reports of increased solar activity, solar spot activity, and solar storm activities. All of this indicates a great shift, ladies and gentlemen. And it brought me back actually to contemplating, and of course our Muslim listeners will know this well, about Suratul Kahf, or the chapter of the cave in the Quran. There's also similar traditions in Judaism and Christianity, and even pagan traditions. In Christianity, you have the 7 sleepers of Ephesus, and it's basically the same story. And the whole gist of the chapter, it has many different parts to it, and all of these parts are integral. They're integrally related, because according to the Islamic tradition, of course, the very order of the surahs or chapters was dictated by the angel Jibril alayhi salam, the angel Gabriel. So we ask ourselves, why is it in this certain order? How does that apply to current events and all of the things that are happening in this world? And basically the main aspect of this is that it behooves all of us to take these principles that we're teaching in these channels of retreating to the spiritual, of being able to marshal our abilities and manifestation to getting on another film roll, and why that's more important than ever due to the circumstances that are happening in the world. So why is the arrangement as such that in the beginning of the chapter it talks about the oneness of God, the oneness, that there is no other God, no other thing that one should focus on, one should worship? Why then does it go into this story of these youths? And basically it is the 7 sleepers of Ephesus and the youth of the cave is a story during pagan times where a certain amount of youth of the nobility in the Roman Empire, I think it was near Jordan where this actually occurred, they accepted the religion of Jesus, of Isa alayhi salam. They accepted the fact that there was one God, and they escaped from the paganism. But what happened was they were persecuted by their people through one aspect or another. Many Christian and apocryphal traditions discuss this, that they were advisors to the governor of that territory and that they had hidden their beliefs. But that was exposed through actions, and then they had to step up and do the right thing. And so basically they were guided to retreat to a cave. And also they brought their dog. And they retreated to this cave and they fell asleep. And then they woke up and they said, we have to go get provisions and food. But when they emerged on the outside world, they found a different world. And this world was actually accelerated centuries into the future. I believe it was 300 and something years in the future. So one night had converted to 300 and something years. So what does this tell us about time? And then of course it talks about how they built a masjid or a mosque or a temple or sacred spot over this cave, and so on and so forth, and the people venerated them, because by the time they emerged from that cave, the religion of Jesus had spread throughout the Roman Empire. But they were shocked to find this. So what does this tell us? And of course, in the Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad said that one should recite the first 10 verses of this chapter every Friday. Or rather, one should recite this chapter every Friday. Why should one recite it every Friday? And that when one sees the Dajjal or the Antichrist emerge, one should recite the first 10 verses of this chapter. So why is it that this chapter is related with the emergence of Dajjal or Antichrist? Who is the Dajjal or Antichrist, or what is it? Because in the Arabic linguistic lexicon, Dajjal comes from the word Dajjala. And this derived from when salesmen of camels would paint their camels or put some kind of dye on their camels to cover up a skin disease. And of course, Dajjal means, or is derived to mean, the liar, the great liar, and the great deception. Is there a deception that we're in right now during these times that is accelerating? That's why we go into our channel about the prison grid and escaping the prison grid. So why does it talk about this? Why does it go into these youths that entered into the cave? What is the cave? And why is it that when one sleeps in the cave, time passes, but yet you do not age, but yet you find yourself in a whole different surrounding of circumstances once you emerge from that cave, and you don't expect it until you leave the cave and see those circumstances? How does that tie in with the manifestation that we teach in this channel? Because, of course, in the modality of manifesting, as I've gone into in many of my videos, the result shows itself to you or comes to you in a way that you don't expect. So the analog is almost perfect here. The analogy is almost perfect. What is it? Well, when you're dealing with a set of circumstances that are getting worse in a way that's making you go down the emotional scale, you simply retreat to that cave, which metaphysically means you go within. You go to your center. You go to your skull, your brain, and then you imagine the circumstances as you wish them to be, and then you go to sleep. And finally, you will find yourself, when you emerge from that, you will find yourself in a short period of time surrounded by another set of circumstances and another timeline. Isn't that amazing? So how does that relate to the times we're in? Then the chapter goes on to, and I hope I'm not skipping anything here. This is from memory. This chapter goes into the story of Moses, Musa, alayhi salam. And of course, the Quran is full of stories of Musa, and we can go into why this is. He's also very prominent, of course, in the Christian and Jewish traditions. He's shared by all the traditions. And that's because Musa, or Moses, gives a master class in the art of manifestation and in the art of metaphysical and spiritual awakening. In this particular story, Moses is setting out to meet a man who's wiser than him, because he asked God, he asked Allah, is there anyone more knowledgeable than I? And God told him, yes, there's a man, his name is Khidr. And who was Khidr? In fact, Khidr figures very prominently in Islamic mystical traditions, and he is said to be an eternal being that lives eternally in these metaphysical conditions or traditions. Of course, this is all apocryphal. But how does that tie into what we're talking about here? Contemplate it. I don't want to just give you all of the answers here, and I probably don't know all the answers, but it just occurred to me as a contemplation. And this video is going to be an example of how you contemplate these facts and how you assimilate them. Who is Khidr? And then, first of all, the way they found Khidr was very interesting, because Moses basically bade his servants to give him the meal, to give him lunch. And it was a fish. But the fish came to life, and it began swimming in the waterway in which they were. And this was a sign that they were getting onto the trail of Khidr. And finally, Musa alayhi salam did find Khidr. How is it that the prophet of the time, that there is a being more knowledgeable than even him? And then Khidr did some things that were completely contrary to the laws of the organized religion, or the laws that were given to Moses or Musa alayhi salam. He broke some of these laws. And we won't go into details, but they were all stories and examples, and there were great metaphysical connotations in these stories, great metaphysical morals to these actions and stories that Musa was told later. But Musa could not handle being with Khidr. because he basically flipped everything that Musa knew, Moses alayhi salam, upside down. And then Khidr finally said, we shall part ways. How could he say that to the prophet of the time? And when they parted ways, Khidr told Musa the reasoning behind everything that he did. And of course, going back, it was very logically able to explain those reasonings. Why is that in there? How does that deal with our times? Who is Khidr? What does Khidr represent? Especially during these times. And why are we to read that during these times? Then it goes into the story of Dhul Qarnayn, who has been compared to Alexander the Great, and indeed some apocryphal interpreters have said that this was Alexander the Great. And he basically went throughout the land, and he found a people that were being molested, that were being harassed by a race of people known as Juj wa Ma'juj. This is mentioned in the Bible, Gog and Magog. Who are Gog and Magog? Dhul Qarnayn basically built a wall to keep these people entrapped so that they couldn't go and molest the population. But it is said in a hadith and in traditions in the Islamic tradition that Juj wa Ma'juj still exist, and they still continue to make holes in this wall, and one day they will escape and wreak havoc on the earth. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, woe to the Arabs when Juj wa Ma'juj emerges. Who are they? Who do they represent? What are the metaphysical meanings behind this? And why were we told to read it during times of deception? Then finally it goes into a tale of two men with two gardens. And the first man had a more beautiful garden than the second man, and he bragged about his garden, and he told his associates, look at my beautiful garden. And he bragged about it. And of course, I'm missing the exact wording here, but then it was destroyed. His garden was destroyed by a natural cataclysm. And the man basically said, woe that I had thanked God, woe that I had thanked Allah, I would still have my garden. And of course his neighbor warned him, do not brag, be grateful and thankful. What does this have to do with the whole mirage of earthly deception and the whole prison grid that we discuss? It's a very interesting chapter, ladies and gentlemen. I'd recommend you all read it. It's called The Chapter of the Cave, Surah Al-Kahf, in the Quran. And you can read the apocryphal Christian traditions on it. It's not much different. And there's more information embedded in that. These are the kinds of things that we need to contemplate. How does it make our lives better? What does it encourage us to do? Well, it encourages us to see the illusion for what it is. It encourages us to withdraw often into the cave of our own mentality, of our own skulls, and to create and forge the world that we want to live in, within, because we know that there's only one power. That's the meaning and the wisdom behind this. That's what I wanted to contemplate with you here today. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be discussing more of these metaphysical aspects of Scripture tomorrow in our Sunday talk, and you don't want to miss that. Also, if you find these videos of value, please subscribe and like to our channel so that we can get this message out to as many people as possible, touch as many lives as possible. I'm also doing coaching, and in these calls, I basically guide you through rapid lifestyle transformation, whatever other issues you want to discuss in light of these great spiritual modalities and in light of the perennial philosophy. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you very soon with much love and appreciation. This is Javier. See you tomorrow.